On this episode of It's Going Good, I speak with Andrew Rea, CEO of TaxWire.com. He joins the conversation to share his insights into the chaotic world of startup management and the unexpected challenges that arise as a company scales. He's recently did a multi-million-dollar funding round. Then he gives us insights and reveals the dynamic nature of leading a startup, where adaptability and a focus on the customer needs are paramount. As he actually puts it, taxes will outlive the United States of America. There will always be taxes. For a deeper dive into Andrew's journey and intricacies of startup life, listen to the full episode. Thanks. Andrew, thank you for joining. Last week, we weren't able to make it because you had fires to put out. And that's like the whole premise of this podcast is talking about those fires, everything that's just unfortunate. So let's just jump right into that. And what was the fire, if you can talk about it? And what did you do to get through that?
Oh man, yes. So good to see you, man. Excited to chat. I feel like sadly there's enough. I feel like the longer I'm a quote unquote startup CEO, I feel like the more fires I have on a weekly basis. We're at the stage where we're hiring a lot, and so that means there's always something. It's like you think someone's about to sign an offer, and now it turns out they want to negotiate with you for more comp at the last minute, and so now you're getting pulled in to be like, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to not do? I actually find the more we grow, the more the HR stuff, just recruiting and HR stuff, seeps into your time more than I would like it to, which is something I'm actually thinking about fixing. But the fire drill last week was actually related to, we had a customer that was actually not a customer yet, but a deal that we were about to win, that at the 11th hour, there was some integration that they decided surprised us with, telling us that they wanted, that we didn't have, that we didn't know they wanted, that we didn't know they needed the entire time. And our sales guy kind of freaked out. And they basically wanted to make a promise that we would put it on the roadmap to just continue getting the deal done. And so I had to get on a deal at that hour and be like, I'm CEO of the company. It's super great to meet you. And so like, this is on our roadmap. I actually went ahead and like try to like re-emphasize with our product team the urgency of this. And so it's like, we're like, I can promise that we'll have it by the end of the quarter. I can't guarantee that it's going to be like next week, but like basically by the end of September, it'll be there. And so in the meantime, this is what we're going to do, because I know there's like a slight workflow that you have that you want to make sure it gets like solved until that happens. And so this is what we're going to do in the meantime to make sure you're taken care of. And then we're going to be all like good and ready to go so that we can still like sign the contract this week, start onboarding next week. And so it's like nothing like that urgent, but it's like enough and a big enough deal that if you want to make sure you get that over the line, it's like, it's got to happen today, and it's got to be right now, and it's got to be the CEO. And that's part of the job. And I'd say I feel like I have something of that ilk, closing a customer onboarding, or there's like something that comes up that you didn't expect, or something recruiting, team related. There's like something of those three ilks of fire drill. There's at least like a 2 or 3 of those a week. I feel like just it's part of the job.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I feel like the tax wire, did you kind of back into like building this whole thing?
I would say yes and no. I think probably in some ways no, in some ways yes. I had every intention of ideating something. I had been at another startup that got acquired, like acqui-hired, so it wasn't a successful outcome. I was pretty much at the yoke of like, okay, I just want to go do my own thing now. I didn't know what yet. I'd been working pretty hard on that company, and so I hadn't had any space to think. And a friend of mine was trying to hire me to be their head of growth, which was similar to the job I was doing at the previous company. And it was like, well, I liked the friend a lot. His company was great, and so this company is now at one of the fastest growing school lunch businesses in America. And so we basically did federal lunch contracts to where we would do like fully supplied local like fresh food instead of like junk, basically, that these like old kitchen companies supply to public schools. And then we had a private school model that was like basically Uber Eats for school lunch, like all local food. It's fresh, it's great. It's way better than most cafeteria lunch experiences. Great business, raised a bunch of money, growing super fast. I joined them in 2023 to be their 6-month run as head of growth, help them hire someone. And then I was going to use that kind of time to make some cash while I figured out like what the hell I was going to start. I was thinking about like completely different ideas than the taxes or sales tax or sales tax compliance. And I got in and it was like, I told my friend, the CEO, I was like, dude, we don't need any help with growth. Actually, our sales reps are closing a bunch of revenue. This is great. And we are super not, but we were running in RFPs and in like our general like going live with customers process. It's super ops heavy business. We just had a ton of ops problems. And so basically I like being I like to think of myself as someone that can just get shit done. It was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go solve this problem. And so we need to solve this problem first. And so I took on finance ops. I like hired a new bookkeeping firm. I like cleaned up our finance stuff. I cleaned up our like state and local compliance that we would get asked about this in RFPs. And so we had to like have the box checked while there. And one of the problems that we had not solved was sales tax compliance because we were at the time operating in about 20 markets, so 20 different states. Sales tax is rather complicated because it's very like localized. Like every state's kind of like its own country with a bunch of little
Right.
small fiefdoms with their own rules and rates and regulations that change all the time. And so, and then we were complex because we had two different businesses. We had a B2B like contract business with the effectively like state governments, and then we had the private school business that was actually more like a consumer business because people just bought directly in the school like on like their phones or something. It was like kids, parents, faculty, and that was considered a marketplace facilitator. I came to learn in the eyes of tax law, which means we had to collect and remit taxes on behalf of the merchants that sold through our platform. And so we had just like this mega complicated tax setup and and so I like ran a process to try to find a vendor to just like do this for me. I didn't want to think about it. And all of the companies that were founded pre 2005 DQ'd me because we were too complicated for them. And so I like ended up working with this like it's a very large company. Their name's Avalara, and we implemented them to solve that problem. And then I had to use this like expensive consulting firm to help me figure out like how to implement them. And it was terrible basically. And so the CEO of that company kept being like, yo, dude, just like stop fucking around with these other ideas. Just like start this company, start a competitor to this piece of shit instead. And I was like, well, maybe. And it was kind of like a curiosity at first. And then I like to joke that I rage quit and started a competitor to that company, which I sort of did, but there was a little more roaming around. But ultimately, like I just had the problem. It was a really big problem. And then as I learned more about the industry and met other people who've been a part of like either like the service offerings at like big four type consulting firms or people that have been at some of the companies I now compete with, I actually was like, oh, there would be actually a pretty interesting opportunity to just go build something that like is much more modern. It does the whole thing for you. So what TaxWire eventually became is like we are like both a tax engine, like have the software that kind of plugs into your systems and does filing, and we do that in a like a much more simple or better way. But a big part of it is we pair that with like AI powered tax experts, where we just like configure the whole thing around your workflows and basically own the outcome. So we take liability for ensuring that you're from start to finish, you both get compliant, stay compliant at everything the trains basically run. And so versus selling you a piece of software that you got to go do a bunch of work to configure yourself. And so that's what we do today as an actual like business. Do that in the US and do that in about like 50 plus countries around the world. But the initial impetus was kind of like, I wanted to start a company. I just didn't think I wanted to start an axe company. And I don't know, like a mix of luck and opportunism. And maybe the last thing is that I do think if you're going to start a company, the customer you serve matters a lot. And it has to be a problem you find interesting enough. But more importantly, that the problem is the customer. You have to like really like your customers, I think, and like want to go because you're basically signing up to work for them. And so if you have to feel, I think something I liked about the space is we mostly sell to VPs of finance, controllers, people like that. And while they're very conservative people, like I very much like I understand them, and they're like rational people. They don't buy shit they don't need, and so they only buy to solve real problems, and they think about it in a very real way. And they're just serious people, and I like serving serious people who don't bullshit basically. Like it just fits me well. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, I can go get up and work for these people for 10 years.
That makes total sense. Tax is definitely complex all on its own, but then you're also selling to finance people, and finance people just look at basically the bottom line.
Yeah,
They're not
100%.
they're not
100%.
really looking for all the fluff.
They're looking to get to like an outcome that they can trust. They're not always necessarily always looking for the cheapest thing, but they don't want to, but they want a fair price. They want a fair price for value, and they want like competence. And
Yeah.
so, and they just like want you to like, and I think a part of how we sell too is that like, hey, like we have like this great piece of software, but ultimately like I'm selling you the software in this like managed service. And we are gonna take accountability of getting you to this business outcome you care about, which is what we're really here to talk about. We're not here to talk about like all these like features you don't care about. You want to know that we're gonna get you to that outcome and do it well, and that's what matters. And so cool. Let's talk about how we actually do that. And so they're just super pragmatic people, which I appreciate it.
No, that's great customer to work for.
Yeah.
Uh,
And taxes are forever, right? And so it's like I think it's a forever pop up. It's like something you can do. Like they might solve. We joke a lot that they might solve death before they solve taxes, and so it's like taxes are, in terms of like a market to work in, it's a problem to work on. It's very boring, but it's something that people have been paying to get to not have to think about since long before you or I were living. And I tend to think that no matter what happens with AI or the world in the next, like taxes will outlive the United States of America. There will always be taxes.
Yeah, for sure. You hit on the AI thing a couple times, and we spoke 2 years ago, I think, on your podcast with Ramil. And 2 years has been a long time in the world of AI. So I'd love to hear how you think about your moat now. Like, how is solving taxes one thing, but pairing software with AI is another? And how has your business changed in these 2 years since we first spoke, and then with the progression of AI?
I think there's two main areas it's changed. I think one is that it's just increased the scope of our own ambitions in terms of like what we actually we can do. I think like, there's it's kind of become a bit of a meme now, but I think like you it just I think the a lot of if you take a step back and think of why do people buy anything in businesses, like why do people buy things? It's like people buy usually they don't buy for fun. They buy to get some kind of business outcome. But if you look at a lot of software, it's kind of like a tool to get to it, like let you get to an outcome better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, whatever. Maybe on the go-to-market side of the house, maybe some software is theoretically helping you close revenue. I don't know, but it's like that's like why it exists. And same with service providers. It's like I don't hire accountants to do my bookkeeping because I need my books kept. And so I hire them to do that work for me. So everything is somehow in service of helping us better get to an outcome or help or to like literally get me to that outcome. But usually software was like the tool. And then you had like services over here. And I think that AI is like, at least in certain areas where the work is not like truly consulting, but it's actually much more close to trying to get an outcome. You're basically going to have this like and you're seeing this, there's this blurring between now that you have intelligence between like what the software, like what you have to do with the software versus just expecting that I can buy a thing that's just going to completely get me to an outcome. So I think what we've seen with it is that like we can actually just take that really, really seriously. And so instead of like, for example, we have this like a big part of our product is like configuring all these like different data sources and mapping products to make sure everything is basically set on autopilot and that it runs effectively across your business. But now like you can actually just but before an accountant would have to spend a bunch of time or a service provider like learning about your business and then basically having you like map all these different like spend hours and hours and hours learning enough about tax so that you can map your business onto this tax engine. And now you can just have you can collect some inputs from your customer and basically have like a an agents do that first pass and then you have a human do the final. Or like you can now like then every month you have to like reconcile your tax accounts to your general ledger. It used to be human would go in, download a report or like think through how to do that. Now you can just like book the entry directly from TaxWire to your general ledger. No one touches it, or maybe your bookkeeper reviews it every month. But like that like work and that reconciliation just gets done for you. We collect documents for our customers. And it used to be the way software would work is you buy a exemption certificate management tool is what in our industry it's called. You collect like I'm selling software to somebody in California that is a manufacturer and they're saying that they're going to use this in their manufacturing process, so they should be partially exempt, and so I should charge them less taxes, and I need to collect this document so that if I get audited, I show the state of California that I'm basically like doing this correctly and not trying to commit tax fraud. And so I have to collect that document, make sure they filled it out correctly, it like chase my customer for it if it's expired. And then I have to, so basically the way this would work is I have to go like upload it, enter all this data, store it, make sure I review it, looks correct. And I'm still paying money to this software product to like store the document for me and maybe send a little an alert if it's expiring based on the information I filled out correctly. And that doesn't sound that bad, maybe, but if you're a big company that manages across, let's say, like 3,000 customers, and it's your sales team or your support team that's collecting these things, imagine like how easy is it to get your sales team to do anything, or to get your support team to do these things all the time? It's terrible. And so it's like actually getting them to collect it is horrible. So you end up like you collect and then your customer half the time doesn't actually know what you need from them. So they send you like the wrong document. They might send you like some IRS doc that has nothing to do with what you actually need from them. And so you get audited, you get fucked, you spend a bunch of money out of pocket. Like I'm giving a very specific example. But what's exciting about this world with AI is that now basically take these like workflows where the human had to do a lot of stitching together between like software products. And you could just like have like we have an email based agent that's actually very similar to Ramp. We took a lot of inspiration from them, where you just tell like I like tell all of our customers now, it's like your sales team does like because like I was just talking to this private equity company about this, and like you don't need your sales team to be added to your tax tool anymore, because like half the time they're not going to do this anyway. You're going to tell them to forward it to this email address, and our agent is going to pick it up, upload it into our system, do all the data mapping and validation, and then if something's wrong, we're going to send like we're going to retrigger an alert either directly to your sales rep, or you can figure it to send directly to your customer. And they're going to be like, yo, basically the AI is going to say like, hey, this is actually like not the correct document. This is the document that you need to send us. Please send it, yada, yada, yada. But basically you cut that whole like all or 90% of it done by an agent. And maybe there's like some piece of human in the middle there, but like basically that work used to be, if you wanted like an outcome like that, you would buy a piece of software and you'd staff it with some like you pay some service provider to do all the work with the software, and that will get you to where like you don't have to do any work to manage the outcome. And I think we are really taking it very seriously, that the future is just going to be like complete end-to-end solutions where you do as much of the work as humanly possible for your customer, and you just have to take that super super seriously. And so you say no less, you say no a lot less to like when customers just want you to do things for them. You actually like you're like, you actually, the default is probably that we probably should be finding a way to do this. And then the question becomes like, what do we have to build to scale it? And to like systematize it and have good SLAs around it, but like whereas in SaaS, like old school SaaS, it's kind of like, no, no, we only do this. Like, it's like you say no a lot more. And so I think just like, and then also just that's like the product offering. Like, I think how we build products and sell them is changing. I think the way you build product is also changing a ton, which is also enabling this. And that now code has just never been cheaper than it is today. And so
Right.
you can generate code much more easily. The way you build software changes a lot. You're much more willing to say yes to things because it's actually much easier. You're kind of not worried about, can I build this or not, most of the time, or you're more so worried about, is there demand for this, or did I build the right thing to actually solve the problem? And so that becomes the harder thing, which, but there's still other, but there's still like, so like just the entire way you like build teams and therefore build products changes. And I actually think I don't think we've figured out anything masterful there. Like literally all the time, our team is trying to like think about this. I think the biggest probably meta change is that you're everyone that like, there's not as like basically product managers here now ship code as much as like engineers do. And so I actually think product managers have become more important, or very product oriented people than they used to be. We're also now trying to get to the place where people like even like on our tax team can ship code. We have like controls over like what they can ship, so they can't like touch anything for super high stakes. But just the entire way you go about like approaching building product has changed. It is still changing. I think everybody's trying to figure out like, I don't think there are best practices. I think people are trying to figure them out. And even if there are best practices, things keep changing so much that they like become obsolete in 3 months. But that's it. Basically, like more people can ship. I mean, I've given you a ton of context, so I would summarize this as like products themselves can just take on a lot more scope and ambition, and you should be trying to unroll problems. And then the way companies are building software and software products is stepping into like a lot more people ship code than they used to. You ship a lot more code, so code is much cheaper. But judgment and what to build and building the right thing becomes much more of the bottleneck. And therefore, like I think everybody's you're almost trying to work on like the system and the process by which you built software much more than like just, oh, is the code like this code is so valuable, it's like, oh, this is less valuable, but like the system by which you produce code is valuable. But with both like how you have like instrument AI to generate code, how you enable people that are beyond just engineers to generate code, and how you and like and all the controls and the systems around that are what and even how you structure your team to do that is what we're experimenting with. And I don't think we fully figured it out. I think it's like, I think everyone I talk to is trying to do this, but it's not easy because it's just like half the shit you're doing today couldn't have been done 6 months ago. So that piece is like super chaotic, if I'm being honest.
I feel like in a business like yours too, hiring used to be, and maybe it still is, correct me if I'm wrong, but hiring was the ceiling. Like you had to, the more clients you brought in, more compliance, more people to hire. Obviously, AI has probably changed that maybe for you most. It has.
To an extent, but I think it's still like, I don't know if it's fully unbottlenecked. Like there are things that are not unbottlenecked. It's kind of like, I think it's exposing in companies that build products, it's exposing that your bottlenecks were different. It's like what to build and how, and people with the judgment to build it well just becomes a bigger bottleneck than it was before. And so that I think and then I think even if you're like truly supercharged by agents, it's like agents need human in the loop to direct them. And I think there's more limitations to a human's ability to direct AI well. Like you can only manage so many things at one time, and humans are not out of energy. And so the just ability to like, I think there's like that. There's almost still a bottleneck of how many people do you have that could truly just drive things. Like is becomes more of a bottleneck. So it's still hard to find those people. And then obviously there's just things in the real world, like customers still want to buy from humans generally. And so like you still have to have salespeople. It's like you
Right.
still need people that are going to go talk to customers. Like I don't think people yet want to buy at least taxes. Maybe they'll buy something more trivial, but they don't want to buy taxes from an AI agent. They want to buy them
Right.
from a human. And your sales guys can only, there is a upper limit to how many deals that they can close.
Do you think you found the line between automation and assurance? Because
No,
you're in a business
no.
where you have a lot of trust on the line. It's not necessarily speed to get the work done, but to make sure that it was done right.
It has to be done right and done on time. And so like that is like ultimately the big thing. And you kind of just get like I think if anything we've probably over invested in trying to be like to have enough slack in our system to where if something goes wrong, we're like we have like enough bandwidth to be able to handle it versus going the other direction where we're like trying to run super lean and all and like pushing the edge of that. Mostly because we know that it's a trust business. So like we have very extremely low churn, which is like one of the things I think we're
That's good.
proudest of. And so it's like I think we take that super seriously. Yeah, but I don't think we've figured out anything magical there.
Which parts of the workflow and like this whole like tax system are you confident that can be fully automated? And then what parts still need human expert review the most?
I'd say in our field is great in some ways that because a lot of it's like a data problem. And so like rules engines and reporting data automation, assuming you get the data correct, is super automatable. It's not like always easy. It takes time to do end-to-end automation more than anything. So there's still like you can't just even with like AI, you're not like able to just like infinitely build everything you want. In actuality, if you at least if you're doing something really ambitious where there's like a lot to build. So if anything, I think we still use human in the loop sometimes for just areas where it's like this is pretty trivial and like I'd rather direct my like engineering and product resources on like harder things that are going to bring in revenue faster. So I think there's still like some of that happens. I think, but then on directly on the things that are like, so there's things that like for sure just can't be automated. It just takes time, and you're just kind of like, how much do I want to invest in this thing that's maybe not differentiating, but it does require work that I need to like that I want to. And then there are things where it's like more questionable, like how much can I automate this? And for our business, I'd say most of those are actually around judgment and answering questions and helping our customers make decisions on taxes in their business. And so I think one of the things that we have done and are trying to lean into more that has been differentiating is like building agents that automate workflows that used to require human judgment or answering actual tax questions and contextualizing the answers to our customer's business, which normally a software provider like us would never want to do because you're opening yourself up to liability
Right.
and you don't want to be in the consulting business, right? And so, but what we found is that even if we want to outsource to like the teleconsulting firms for that piece, their incentives are misaligned with what the business actually cares about because they're incentivized to spend more time consulting because the more time they spend consulting with you about your problem, the more money you spend with them.
Right.
Whereas for us, we actually don't have that incentive. We want to get you to a compliant outcome. So it's like just as much time answering the question as will get you to the outcome. But like, I don't want to have to, I have no incentive as of now with our business model to spend more time doing that. And so I think those are two things that I'm thinking about that I don't always have firm answers to. It's like the workflows are probably more straightforward of like we can it's like you can generally like it's like you as long as you get enough context and you've like you can generally and like you get enough like data and you keep like training the agents to be better generally they can you're getting to the point where you know you can like 80-90% of the time you can get to enough of a percent of the time that it's going to do the workflow 100 like at this percent of accuracy that it's fine
Right.
because humans were already not 100% accurate so you're not actually being measured against like 100% you're being measured against or am I better than a human accountant doing the same thing or am I like good or am I as like as good as that accountant and I'm doing it at a similar price or like at a cheaper price basically and so like the workflows I feel the best about it's just more of like a march of like how far can you push it the areas where we've breached into answering customers tax questions how we've approached that to date is we basically have tax people in house And then we have an internal like we basically have an index of the tax law, and we are like supercharging their ability to just like answer questions and like get our customers answers that are contextualized
Right.
to their business fast. And we're debating right now like how far do we think we can push that? And do we think there's a world in which we just like do we think someday we just like want to like remove the human piece and like have the first line of defense be this like basically you're in Slack and you're like, oh wait, we're gonna go into if I open up an office in Ireland, what do I need to think about for that? And they ask us that question, and like we know we're already doing sales tax. They want to know the answer to that for their business. Like, do we just give them an AI that answers the question, and we see that gets this, or do we run that through our tax team? I just see if the efficiency is that like they can instead of servicing 50 clients, service 500 clients. Like things like that are like big open questions for us that we don't have answers to yet. It's like clear some of these things can be automated, but to what it's both like it's even because it's even like on some of them, it's even if I could automate it, can I actually do people still want the human in the loop? Is that a core part of the value? Is feeling like a human's answering, even if in theory an AI could give them the same answer?
Yeah, that's a good point because I feel like a lot of stuff these days is like, well, sure, AI could do it, but do you still want to talk to a human? Because
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
still that human connection, I guess you could say. So that's interesting. How many people do you have employed right now?
A little over 30.
Okay, that's good. Are they all in New York, or you got them scattered, or
New York's all so all of go to market, most of our leadership and product team are in New York, and then but engineering and like our tax team is all over the place. So because we also do tax in like getting close to 100 countries, and so we have people in Europe. We have a
Right.
handful of folks in like the Philippines slash like broader Southeast Asia, and then the US. So we have like some folks on the West Coast and some folks in New England. So it's like about half the team in New York though.
Makes sense. That's cool. Every founder's got like this one thing that they haven't figured out yet. And I think you're in an interesting spot because you go off of tax law. So it's pretty much already figured out for you. But what is there anything that you haven't figured out yet and that you're trying to get through?
Yeah, I think like we're trying to. There's a few things. I think I'm just still trying to think about how to put this. It's like there. I think the three that are most top of mind right now are I'm one just trying to figure out how to be an actual CEO at least at our stage of company because like I've never been a CEO before, and like you're not really a CEO in my or barely like you're not doing a lot of actual CEO things when you're like CEO of a super early stage company that doesn't have customers. And so, but as we've grown a lot in the last like 6 to 12 months. And so I've had to start doing more like traditional CEO things, which is like I don't necessarily think I'm very good at. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do that job basically and do that job in a way that is gonna work for because I think in startups, there are generic CEO things you do have to do, but then there's kind of a lot of ways to actually approach the job and structure the company for how you want to do the job. And I think I'm still figuring out what the answer is to that for me and for us. So that's one thing. I think the and then more in like just like things I'm trying to figure out in the business is like I think we've like done a really really great job of carving out like a position in the market. But I think the markets like our market it's gotten more competitive. It's like there's like a lot of new startups in it. It's also like we're going up market a bit now too, and we're like so I'm happy to think about like these different segments of our customer base. It's like how we talk to mid market accounting firms is maybe different than how we need to talk to like NetSuite shops that just help like NetSuite customers manage a lot of NetSuite instances is and how we talk to a tax director it's very different than maybe how we want to talk to a controller of a $5 billion business. And so it's like so I think just like thinking through like positioning and then how we tell a cohesive story. But as we like grow and like the market's competitive, I have probably 2x as many competitors as I used to. It's like we're also like expanding into parts of the market we did. It's just like telling like a sharp story that's like sufficiently sharp in differentiating as there's more noise in the market, but also that is resonates with the different segments but without being like you don't what I think you don't want to have anyway is I don't think you want to be telling a fundamentally different story to like a your $100 million revenue customer or works with customers like that versus telling like the same versus telling a completely different story to like some other customer. It just doesn't work. So like your story needs to be cohesive but flexible enough to where you can kind of like hit the points that resonate for different parts of different stakeholders basically. And I think that's just something that like you don't think about at all when you're just trying to get your first. You're just basically trying to tell like solve a problem in a way that's differentiated and like your business in your first like when you're going from 0 to 1. As we've started scaling and having to think through just like positioning and the way you tell the story across the everyone the business is something that I'm more recently thinking about than maybe I thought about like a lot less in the early days.
Yeah, it's something that's not really talked about too much. You see a lot of people put like CEO as their title, and then you get talking to them, it's like, oh, you're the founder.
You're just like the
It's,
founder of a business that's like you and like
it's
your
you and
friend.
Claude.
Yeah, you and Claude. Yeah, you and Claude. It's like anybody can be a CEO. It's just like open up an LLC and put like announce on LinkedIn that I'm happy
Yeah,
to share that I'm
exactly.
announcing that I'm the founder and CEO of Stealth Company.
Right. Who did you hire that once you realized you were moving from founder to CEO, who did you hire to kind of help alleviate that growth pain? Did you hire like a chief of staff, or was it like a VP or somebody that you hired,
I
director?
think the first thing I did was I built the leadership team. So I think, and I don't think I actually would do. So I'm still trying to solve some of this problem. So I don't think I have all the answers. I think I was correct that I needed ultimately to build a strong leadership team. It couldn't just be me making all the decisions. And so the first big one is I hired someone on the revenue side, like a head of growth, to help come think about not just like how do we close deals, but how do we build like a machine.
Right.
And so that person was great, but it also took 6 months to hire them. So that was like I probably way underestimated how long it would take to find the right person. And then we eventually brought in like another founder that I knew to be at a product. We brought in someone to run our like operations and CX org. And so, and I think those so far, those hires have been really, really great and key for us like up leveling ourselves in the last like 6 to 8 months as a company to actually be something that can scale. It's a piece that, but there's kind of like all the other, and like there's all these other things that don't neatly fall into like a most functional heads that still end up being on your plate as a founder, like HR, maybe like a bunch of finance shit, payroll, just like even just like basic people shit, just the amount of things people ask you, or the amount of things I get asked on a weekly basis about like how do our benefits work in this like very specific way, and like I end up being the person that gets those questions, and then if you don't answer them quickly, people start getting upset, and then people are complaining at you, and it's like it's like a lot of slow bleed things that just start hitting you more and more and more, and then the just the major parts of the business are taking up more and more of your time, and so or demand at least some degree of your attention. And so I think that piece I've not solved well. Like we hired a chief of staff at one point that didn't work out. I probably have like a couple lessons of like what didn't work out there, but and then basically I've been trying to hire the person since then, and I don't have that person right now, so it's kind of shit. It's kind of a shit show. We're actually interviewing for it right now. If you think you are said person, please reach out. But yeah, it's like it's been that's probably the one that I feel like I've done the worst because I also early on felt I could just do everything because I'm not like 50 and I've been an executive for a long time, and so I'm like used to having lackeys do things for me. I'm just someone that I also have I grew up in a very blue collar environment, so you just do the work, and that's my
Right.
orientation. And so I kind of just always think I could just do more work. That's fine. More work is whatever. But there's actually like even if you can do more work, is a limit to hours of the day. And there's a bigger trade-off of like what work should you really be doing that's going to actually move the company forward. And I like didn't really deeply appreciate that until I was drowning and it was hurting the business that I was drowning. So yeah, basically you shouldn't take advice from me on this. I would love advice if you have any on this.
There's plenty of people we can reach out to for your chief of staff. Or are you wanting them stateside or anywhere?
I think this time we're just trying to hire an ops person. Ideally, actually in New York. I'll do them in New York just because
Okay.
like I want someone who can just like work super like I'm very in the office with me is like my preference.
I feel like I already know the answer to this one, but do you have all of your SOPs and everything put in place already? Or is that something
No.
you're always putting, or it's just not there?
Well, it depends in certain functions, sure, but like for me myself, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There it is. Yeah. You got to get those in
Yeah,
place, man. That's what changes everything. Once you have that, that's the hardest stuff to get down, though, too. Was
I
there a
should. I
hire
should.
along the way that you knew you would need to eventually make, and maybe you hired them sooner than you thought you would need to?
I wish. I mean, this is the thing that I wish I would have done. I wish I would have made that hire much sooner, and I wish I would have hired on the revenue side much sooner than I did. Because I
Mm,
actually think there was a lot of advice. I don't like if you're someone that follows like startup advice or like if you are familiar enough with what like the the luminaries say you should do if you're on like tech
right.
Twitter or something. The founder led sales is like the thing that you should do. You should do founder led sales for as long as humanly possible because it's going to get you all the learnings, the ways to make product better, and to like sharpen the messaging and make sure your product work fit and all these things. I think that was a mistake for us because or because I waited too long to hire sellers, and because of that, we just didn't get a lot of the things to start. But we could have been starting to build an actual machine, not just closing
Right.
revenue, much faster than we did. And so I think like I wish I would have listened to that advice a little bit less. Not like stepped away from sales, but brought in help much sooner so that we could start like actually building machinery instead of just brute forcing more revenue. But like ultimately there was going to be an upper limit to how much that would scale. So that's actually the mistake I would make. I think my biggest flaw maybe has been that I feel like I'm always behind on hires, not ahead of it. Yeah. So like basically a way of saying don't do what I've done. I think maybe the one I have is that we're now trying to get ahead of this actually on a couple hires as is today. We don't think we need someone, but we think we're going to. So one of those would be partnerships. We're hiring a partnerships person right now, and we on paper don't think we necessarily need that. We could probably do it ourselves, plus with our salespeople. But it's such
Right.
a key part of how we go to market and how we think we're going to scale that we're trying to just we think we need that person in the seat by end of year so that they're like ramping going into next year. And so we're literally interviewing people for it right now because we're like we should just go try to find this person today. It's assuming that if it takes us a bunch of time, we probably don't have them in the seat till October anyway. Maybe later. And so at worst case, we'll be on time. At best case, we might get them early, and who knows? Maybe we'll start like be able to like bring in even more revenue faster.
No, that's good. As kind of rolling into your funding here, it was 25 million, right?
Yes.
Were all the investors already on your cap table, or were these new investors?
So, yeah. So the story mostly actually, yeah, in the series I on our cap table. So we had raised the pre-seed in December of 2023, and then we were pretty heads down building without customers for like a little over a year. And then we had just started onboarding customers like last spring. And then we raised a seed round. At the seed round was like a weird, so the pre-seed I ran like a process. I did like 200 something meetings with angels and VCs and like a 6 week time span just to like, and eventually we ended up with a really competitive round, but it was a bunch of work. And then the seed was a little different in that we were basically there were a couple of people that were moving somewhat preemptively with like intentions of preempting, and then I could kind of and then generally like our existing investors were pushing us to go raise anyway, and so I was kind of like, okay, I've got some people moving. I could probably so we basically like as people moved more seriously, I basically started running a process in the background lightly. Like my investors were introducing me to people, and I was having like meetings, being like, "Hey, like we're probably going to raise. This is roughly where we're at. I don't have materials yet. Yada 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 yada." And then we're going to, and we kind of told the story, and then. And to be clear, this was like more nerve wracking than it sounds because like that is like I don't know like it was very like fundraising. I'd never done any of this shit before, so like every time I was doing it, felt like just the most intensive thing ever, at least to me. But that process basically though, we ended up getting a bunch of like we did end up getting a couple folks that did put up preemptive term sheets. So we kind of ran this like very accelerated process and we're fortunate to get a bunch of term sheets and then pick some folks we were excited to work with. And so XYZ Ventures actually led that round. And then Headline came in as like a co-lead, but with them. But Headline is in more of like a Series A B fund, and so but the partner there that I worked with, we liked her a lot, and actually they both wanted to do that deal themselves independently, and we were fortunate to convince them to do it together. With XYZ as kind of the primary lead, but the reason we did that was that I wanted to work with both of them, and then two, I just really liked Taylor and Headline. And Taylor, like she's a CPA, she used to run finance, she was a competitor, customer of one of our biggest competitors now. And so she knew the space and knew the market well, and we were just really aligned with the type of business we wanted to build. And then XYZ, they're just like they had backed a bunch of other like friends of mine's companies, and so ultimately we felt like that was a good group. That was our seed round. That was like a year ago now. So we closed that last year in July, and then Taylor Headline had been like really excited about like the progress we made since then. And then I think it was earlier this year they started kind of bringing it up, and then I guess this would have been like February, March. Ultimately we kind of decided to lean into that conversation, and so they put up a term sheet in front of us that was super fair, and we didn't run a process in this case, and we just took it. Did the round and kind of and then existing investors double down. That's basically it. And then we announced this maybe a couple months ago. So that one was weirdly enough the easiest one we raised. I don't expect it to ever be like that again. That was like a lucky moment in time where we had
Right.
people that were excited about how we were approaching the business, and so very much like yeah, just the fundamental different experiences. I would say raising the environment versus other things.
Yeah. What's the scariest part of having 25 million in the bank that nobody warned you about?
I think you just have, I think every founder has different relationships with money probably. And so I think it's just like, it's a lot of expectations. Like I actually would say that like people that are relatively outside the startup world or that have never run companies but aspire to view it as super exciting. And then by the time you're in the seat and you've been doing the thing, it's just like it's just capital. It's capital. And like you take it really seriously, but it's responsibility, it's increased expectations. And then it's just like it doesn't feel maybe there's like a quick moment. I actually even think the day the money hits, it's not even like you don't even feel anything. It's
Right.
because the any by the time you know you're gonna close a round, it happens well before the money hits, like you kind of
Right.
know. And so it's like it's just expectation weight pressure, and you just like it's more of like, okay, like I don't think I don't think it feels the way people think it's gonna feel, maybe. It just feels like a lot of responsibility. And I think
Yeah.
that's that. And even now, it's like having all the money in the bank. It's like there's probably two things. Probably it's like so much more responsibility than anyone thinks. And then I also think for just most people in your life, ever like people that don't really know what you do, like your parents are probably gonna think you're rich. And you're like, I'm not. I'm actually very much the opposite of rich. I don't have any more money in my personal bank account than I did before. I'm still taking a deeply under market salary. And so if anything, like I'm one of the least compensated people in the business. And so from a cash perspective. And so which is it's fine, it's what I signed up for, but it's like people think you're in like almost a different life position than you really are, I would say. So yeah, it's just the relationship you as the founder and the CEO have with it is probably very different than I think what people on the outside think it
Yeah.
must be like.
For sure. That's kind of like the whole point of the show is it's going good. There's a lot of stuff that people just wouldn't understand. So you have
Yeah, and
family
it's like
there to
raising a
take.
ton of money is like you're a bunch of, or at least it's not even that much. There's a lot of like people raise so much money these days that like, oh wow, it's like kind of a blip in the great scheme of things. But it's like I think I mean, the most money my dad never made more than like a good year combined for my parents would have been like $40,000 was probably like the best they maybe ever did
Yeah.
peaking out, and like we probably were more like in the 30 to 35 range most of my life, which is like and so it's like an enormous amount of money on one hand. At the same time, it's like it just you really if you really want to win and you care about the responsibility, it raises the expectations so much on the business that it's more of like even on paper, if we have success, now the goals that we have to hit to get to the next level are so big that like it's just kind of like you don't feel like you've made it. You feel actually very far from having made it. You feel like if anything, you've got like a lot of people to go to the door for now. So I think that's just the if you don't want that, you actually probably really shouldn't raise money
Right.
because like it does you're like signing yourself up for like a very specific way of building a company, and so it actually I think you have less freedom, not more.
Yeah.
So
No, for sure.
pros and
You
cons.
think you'll look back and wish you would have maybe paid yourself a little bit more during this whole thing?
Maybe it's probably like will be like a hindsight bias is 2020 if we like
Yeah.
deliver on like all of our ambitions. I probably won't care, and I'll talk about like how like I like scrummed it and like, but of course the equity
Right.
value is going to be so amazing that like I probably won't care. And I think if we don't have that, then I probably will care. I think just generally abstract of whether we win or not, I do think just from a stress perspective, I probably should have paid myself more in the first 2 years than I did. Because I like basically paid myself extremely little, and it definitely caused a lot. Like I think mentally, it was a lot of stress for me just like thinking about that. It's like in the back of your mind, and probably wasn't good for the business. I probably could have made better decisions not feeling that way, but I think I just felt so much like need to not like take cash from the business that I just I didn't do it that way. So like on paper, what I would tell someone else to do is to take more than I did, but yeah, but I still didn't do it. So I don't know. Again, like don't listen to like look at what I did. I don't know. I don't have advice for anyone. So
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, there's a lot of people that I would say that in hindsight would say they should have paid
just pay
themselves
yourself
more.
more. Yeah,
Yeah, but to each their own. So
indeed.
ultimately, I think you could say it's going good. But if you were at the dinner table with friends and family and business came up, what's the part that you don't say out loud when they ask that question of how's business going?
I think I've never had more. I probably never been more anxious and stressed out of my life. Yeah, and I look and I think I'm like I'm doing a lot of things to try to like not actually show up that way in work. But I think like it's never been harder to manage my psychology than it's been like the last like year. And so like I think like I've probably been more at the verge of just feeling like I'm gonna like lose my shit than just like the pressure of it. I think I feel like I both feel like I've never been a more confident of myself. Like I feel much more confident than I ever have, and I also feel like a complete imposter more than I ever have. And so like that, like just like I think the managing that is like something that I don't show to a lot of people. But I think if I'm being super honest, it's like that's I'm still trying to figure out how to keep my head on straight through the whole thing.
No, that makes sense. And I think you'll always experience that, at least from people I've spoken with. Like the imposter syndrome, if you will always be there at every single stage that you hit. It's just what it does.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at least we know
That's what they
now we
tell
need,
me.
yeah, now we know from this call that you need to pay yourself more and we need to find you an ops person. And then so
Indeed.
it's like 90 days out, what would be a mark for you that you would look back and say, okay, we just killed it. We executed so well.
Hired the ops person. I probably got a lot better at deciding both what I'm going to spend my time on. I'm going to say that too, but also like what I'm going to like let my, that also includes just what I even let my mind spend time on. Cause it's like, you cannot be doing something and your mind is still on it. So I think just much better use of my time. Part of that is hiring. And then ideally what, how that shows up in the business is that we make better decisions and are more focused, but which I think largely comes from the top. It's like, if you're not making better decisions and being more focused, it's likely will show up on other parts of the company. And so I think that that's something that I would hope. And I think like, and then like the actual business results, I think will come downstream of that. That would be my hope through.
Okay, that's great. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate how you've been open about the whole thing. Pretty much just a wide open book. I feel like a couple themes where, the shift from founder to CEO, that's hardly ever talked about, where AI helps versus where trust is going to matter most, and how much of scaling is really about hiring the right people around you. And I don't think I've met anybody at any revenue level that hasn't brought up hiring and the challenges around it. So know that, nothing's off beat, if you will. So, but before we wrap, is there anything you feel like we didn't touch that we should tell the story more on?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered most of the big stuff. I try. I appreciate you. I've respected you from knowing each other somewhat for a couple of years, and respected you from afar with all the things you've done and built for a long time. And so it's great to do this. And I appreciate you having me on. And I think, I don't know, the one thing I at least attempt to do whenever I do shit like this is to just be honest, because I think there's so many people that act like they have it all together. And at the very minimum, I will at least just try to shoot straight, especially with other founders, about just like what the good, bad, and the ugly, because there's enough people that only talk their book in public, that I think it's just like, I don't know. I don't have a ton to offer beyond just the truth as best I can speak it.
I appreciate that. And that's the whole, like I said, the whole premise of this show. So hopefully I get more and more stories. And if you have anybody you think that would be a great fit to be on here, send them my
For sure.
way.
For
Let me
sure.
help you out with
I'll send you
your
some
hiring
names.
needs. Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, thanks again, Andrew. And we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right. So yeah. On this episode of It's Going Good, I speak with Andrew Rea, CEO of TaxWire.com. He joins the conversation to share his insights into the chaotic world of startup management and the unexpected challenges that arise as a company scales. He's recently did a multi-million-dollar funding round. Then he gives us insights and reveals the dynamic nature of leading a startup, where adaptability and a focus on the customer needs are paramount. As he actually puts it, taxes will outlive the United States of America. There will always be taxes. For a deeper dive into Andrew's journey and intricacies of startup life, listen to the full episode. Thanks and enjoy